I seem to have developed these new powers after being hit by that solar flare. I don't think I can control them.
Isn't there a way to control this?
There is one way I could potentially control my new powers.
What is it?
You call this control? Oh, hold on. Here we go. You're now experiencing Phoenix. Oh, I like it. I like to stop singing. Okay. No, this is how I should have solved all my problems. Yeah, and it wouldn't mess up the timeline much. You know what? I'm going to make amends, and I think see if I can fix everything and be a true hero of this new power. Well, that's better than being a villain. Yeah.
Do that again. You're driving me insane. Kiss me once more. That's another thing I like you for.
That sorted it. Yeah. Time for round 2. Woo! Okay, so this is 8 what goes last year. But I might burn your face.
I like it more every day. And I like it always hearing you say you're liking it too. You're liking it too.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of X-Men Dark Phoenix, the 12th X-Men universe film in the X-Men universe, following X-Men, X-Men 2 or X2 or X-Men 2, X-Men United. Just pick a title already. X-Men The Last Stand, X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, The Wolverine, X-Men Days of Future Past, Deadpool, X-Men Apocalypse. Did I miss one? No. Logan, Deadpool 2, and now finally X-Men Dark Phoenix, which may also be the final film in this universe due to the following the Disney-Fox merger. And they might even have knew that. There's also supposed to be this New Mutants film that was supposed to be coming out last year, and then this year now it seems to not even be coming out at all, at least not as a theatrical film. If it does come out, then I want them to make Deadpool 3 to follow that, and that be the conclusion, because the New Mutants sounds more like a beginning film rather than a concluding film like Dark Phoenix does. So it would fall to Deadpool 3 to wrap up the entire franchise before passing over to the MCU. So Dark Phoenix, how does it stand as a finale? Well, when I saw it, I was blown away. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. On reflection, not so much. I mean, I still think highly praise it, but I think it might go the same way as Deadpool 2, where it will get lower and lower in opinion, but not terribly low, like Origins Wolverine, for example. Might not stick that low, but yeah, a rewatch may be in order, but not just yet. That being said, I am overdue for a Deadpool 2 rewatch, especially with getting the Blu-ray and the Super Duper Cut version as well, but they'll have to wait. I'll get round to doing another X-Men franchise viewing at some point, doing reviews for all of the other films up to Days of Future Past, plus maybe re-reviews of Apocalypse, and either a re-review or a re-edit of the score for Deadpool 2. Deadpool 1, I think, is the only one I can say is definitive at the moment. For the ones I've already done. So, Dark Phoenix. The plot sees the X-Men, now in the 90s, going up into space to rescue some astronauts before being hit by what appears to be a solar flare, but isn't actually a solar flare. It's a energy from. It's a space energy thing, and Jean, in order to help save the astronauts, Jean heads out to try and see if she can delay the force coming at them, and is accidentally absorbs it all, and gains in heightened powers, and eventually becomes the Phoenix in the end. And soon her powers start to take over and corrupt her, and start to break down memory barriers that Charles Xavier put in to in his mind. He's trying to protect her, and soon Jean starts losing control, and in some cases beginning to become evil, until she's approached by some aliens disguised as humans, trying to get this force back from them. And one of their leader, played by Jessica Chastain, manages to succeed partially before she is stopped, and eventually she has to come back for the rest of it. And the final fight ensues between Jean. Jean realizes that she needs to protect her family, and eventually is able to stop the aliens. That's basically the gist of it. Lots of great spectacle, by the way, lots of great CG, so I'll applaud the CGI and the visual effects and the editing for giving us some spectacular views, especially when it's there's all around everybody, like with Cerebro, or when the aliens are talking to Jean about the space dust. It all looks really impressive, but lovely visual effects don't make a great story. And whilst I did like this story, I can tell lots of people are very, very not happy with it. Quite a lot of division with this film, and I can see why. Some people might even think the Last Stand film did a better story with the Phoenix Saga. And to be honest, in the terms of a saga, that makes a lot of sense, because that one did have a trilogy to build it up, especially as it was hinted at the end of the second film, building up the characters built up over the trilogy. Whilst here we've only had 2 films with them, and the Phoenix Force comes right at the start of this, very close to the start of this one. I did have the feeling before seeing this film that we should have had one more in between Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, and also that would have been a good one to set in the 90s, whilst this one could have been set in the 2000s, which would have mirrored or synced up with the timeline of the original trilogy, more or less, as that's what seemed to be happening with Days of Future Past, in a way. But this film actually changes the timeline yet again, which is another negative. It's the timeline is now absolutely uncontrollable. This timeline is so convoluted, so messed up. I mean, Days of Future Past tried to reset it in a way, but now it seems that that's gone out the window, and it's now made, and because of that, it's made the plot, made everything more convoluted, more confusing. It's made it so messy that if this is the last one, then in terms of a timeline, then that's actually a good thing. So once the X-Men do join the Marvel Cinematic Universe at some point in the next decade, then they'll be able to create a new timeline, and all this convoluted stuff can be put to the side, so that they can create their own new one. Because if this timeline had continued into the MCU and add the changes into that, then it would have gotten even more complicated. So because this one makes what Days of Future Past already made it a bit convoluted anyway, but in a sort of it makes sense kind of way. And that was at the end. This time round, everything is completely different, and it also doesn't quite make sense nor sync up with the future parts of Days of Future Past, nor with Logan, which undervalues those 2 films, and those are the 2 best ones, in my opinion. It undervalues those 2 in that sense, as well as also the Deadpool films. But then again, those two were basically ignoring Origins Wolverine. Fine by me, by the way, for that bit. But because of this change now, it seems to undervalue Days of Future Past, Logan, and the Deadpool films. So it's a bit confusing, and also anything with Wolverine outside of those films Well, okay, the Wolverine and the original films. Like I said, it's Days of Future Past had this new timeline thing that sort of mirrored the original films, but not the exact same events happened. They changed time. But the people from those that timeline, the actors playing them, they were there and they were fine. The events of those films hadn't really played the same way. So yeah, and then that would lead to the events of Logan, of course. But here it now changes everything. So not only do we not have any mirrored of the original films, there's now nothing at all, and now we also don't get any Days of Future Past nor Logan. Are the Deadpool films the only ones that are actually consistent in a way? So because of that, everything else is basically undermined. Even like I said, Days of Future Past did sort of do that, but in a good way. This time round, not so much. I mean, I did get the reason that it does do this is with the death of Jean at the end of this film, which that doesn't quite make sense. I did expect she was probably going to die, but if the film had been taking place in the 2000s, I think that would have worked. It could have mirrored Last Stand in that way, but how they did it here, it completely changes the timeline once again, and this time not for the good. Unless you want to erase all everybody's deaths in Logan, I suppose. But because of that, it looks like it's a good thing the series has ended now, if it has. Because if this is how things are now, it's got a lot of strings to untie, and therefore it might as well it's a good thing that they're just going to cut them once when they join the MCU, so that's probably a good thing. So yeah, that was my main problem with the film, that the timelines are now completely messed up by the end of the film. I mean, like I said, if there was another film in the middle that had been taking place in the 90s, and then this one was in the 2000s, and it sort of mirrored Last Stand, not directly the same, not another adaptation, just, it's another adaptation of Phoenix Force, but, the Phoenix Saga, but just mirrored it in timeline-wise, like it was taking place in 2006 or 2007, for example, then it wouldn't have been too bad. It might have made a bit more sense. It might have had a bit of Days of Future Past bits, might have been undermined, but small price to pay. But this time around, being set in the 90s, it sort of completely undermines it. So that was my major problem with it, and sorry if I went on a bit too much about it. Also, the characters are still looking how they were in the past few films. With the ones from First Class, they're still looking like how they would in First Class Days of Future Past. Instead of they're not looking as old as we would expect them, like how the original cast actors looked. It might have been a better idea for this film to feature Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and Kelsey Grammer. You could debate whether Rebecca Romijn or Jennifer Lawrence to be as Mystique, but it might have been better to have some of those older casts, so you can have a transition. So it looks like it's transitioning from prequel into the original again with that Days of Future Past timeline. So as much as I loved the actors in this one. But in terms of on a timeline scale, it may have looked better, or at least try to make them look a bit older. Anyway, I think they tried a little, but not a huge amount. And the Charles's his character arc was a bit odd as well, because at some points he was looking like he was a bit of a villain as well. In some places, and also Magneto, his revenge quest as well on Jean after, spoiler alerts, Mystique gets killed, although the trailer sort of spoiled that. It didn't show how exactly, I won't say how, but it's still quite shocking and pretty nasty. But Magneto going on a revenge quest, even though it knows it could damage his new mutant community that we saw, damage the reputation. I think he's I think Mr. TARDIS Reviews, aka Troby Reviews, I should say, same person, put it bestly. He's basically there for obligation. And I also think, whilst Hank would want to get Beast would want to get revenge, he basically does just completely changes sides in a way, which is something I would not expect for his character. And also, we don't get enough of Quicksilver. I don't know what it was, but he's not in the film that much. He's in the first act, but after the first encounter with Jean, after she goes a bit crazy with the power, he's basically absent for the rest of the film until the end. So it looked like he was injured, but couldn't he have healed a bit faster to be a bit more involved? It's just that it looked like they just wanted to get rid of him for the rest of the film after the first attack by Jean as the Phoenix. I do have to say, Sophie Turner does an amazing job as Jean Grey. She brings all the emotion to the surface. I think she delivers the role exceptionally brilliant. I've gotten in my original Apocalypse review, I wasn't so keen on the younger cast as the older ones, but over the years I've sort of gotten used to them. Again, another movie would have helped with that. But I think they do a great job here with this installment and do it brilliantly. And I think Turner does an amazing job as Jean Grey, considering she's got the weight of the film on her as it's about her character. I think she does exceptionally well. Jessica Chastain also does a good job as the villain, although these villains may not have been as necessary. They're aliens who want to control this force, and their story did feel a little bit unnecessary, a little bit slapped on, just to be other villains, or to be the main villains, as opposed to it's Jean, a bit like in Last Stand where Magneto goes full-on villain as well. We also have two other mutants who accompany Magneto and Beast, but they're basically just there for action scenes and for fight stuff and just die. And a couple of cool lines earlier on, but that's about it. Shame, could have gone to know them a bit better, but well. I don't know if they're that well-known characters in the comics, so that's really about it. So, yeah, it looks really great. I do like how at the start they are treated like heroes as opposed to violated against, as the other films have shown. However, the events of the film do put that into question again. I think by the end, it's sort of back to the 50-50 opinions that they've had over the years. But I did like how at the start they were treated as heroes and adored by humans as opposed to violated against. Also, Easter egg, they also set up the Mutant Control Unit, which I think appeared in Deadpool 2 last year. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure Deadpool must have made a joke about it, how it stand for said MCU, and he must have made a joke about the Marvel Cinematic Universe somewhere. But that's a nice little Easter egg with the Mutant Control Unit on the guards when they're wearing it. So that's a nice little Easter egg of where the series will be heading, where the characters will be heading next in the next couple of years, hopefully. Let's hope their timeline is a little more stabilized instead of the convolutedness we've had of this series. And the train fight is also amazing, mixing visual effects and practical. And I really like how Nightcrawler basically goes on a bit of a short vengeance mission after a nice guard who let them out is killed by one of the aliens, and he basically tries his best to get revenge. And the fight itself is also really epic, as I mentioned, mixing the visual effects and practical stuff. It looks all great, and it is probably one of the best climaxes of the series, although the actual climax is when Jean takes on the aliens single-handedly and then eventually takes one of them up, the leader up, and blows her up in space, which also kills Jean. Told you that it convoluted the timelines. So, yeah, and a nice little bit of a wrap-up afterward with Charles retiring and Beast taking over as the headmaster, and Charles and Eric go and play a game of chess in Paris. And it pretty much wraps up this series. Like I said, sort of undermining Days of Future Past and Logan. There is also no mid or post-credit scene. Then again, the first two films didn't either, but like Avengers Endgame, this definitely feels very much like a finale. Deadpool 2 had some mid-credit scenes, but I don't think it had didn't tease the next film or what would come next. So yeah, Dark Phoenix. I would say it's a great way for the series to end, but I think the way it ended wasn't that great. I really think this film should have been set in the 2000s. In fact, it didn't really have much of a point being set in the 90s, apart from maybe the fact that the Dark Phoenix saga may have been originated in the 90s. But I think it should have been set in the 2000s. I think there should have been another film in the middle that would have been a 90s era-based film, and then we get this one in the 2000s, and then that sort of syncs up with the timeline. If not, then set it in the 2020s, between Days of Future Past and Logan, so about 2026 or something. So that would tie into the timeline much better. And again, you'd also get the older actors. As much as I liked the new ones in this film, as much as I loved them, but in terms of I'm just thinking from a timeline point of view. And yes, but on the whole, it's actually great, but there is still quite a few problems, especially if you're a timeline nut. And so the story might not work for everybody. I did like the start with the Jean origins, similar to how X-Men The Last Stand opened, although a bit differently this time round. But like Last Stand, we get to a very Jean orientated opening, and I actually really liked this one. I really liked it, so I thought it was this opening bit, and I think this, from that to the end of the space mission, and around the time where Jean starts becoming the Phoenix, that was the best bits of the film, plus the train fight. But there are parts of the film where it does lose its way, and it is difficult to understand what the point is, and yeah, like I said, the ending basically ruins parts of other films due to just time continuity mess up, which annoys me. So it's going to be very confusing for other people. So on the whole, I think it's a good film, and I've had a great time, but in the grand scheme of things, it does sort of ruin other stuff, which is a bit of a shame, quite a bit of a shame. So I'm going to give Dark Phoenix, X-Men Dark Phoenix, a 8 out of 10. Give it a 9, but after thinking about it, and also with the timeline kerfuffle, I've lowered it down to an 8. I still really liked it. I still thought it was brilliant, but there is a lot of problems with it, and especially when it comes to that very ending. I did expect Jean to die, but that was just that was just me anticipating. And yeah, like, I think they really should have set this one in the 2000s at the earliest, or the mid to late 2020s at the latest. So it would have synced up with Days of Future Past's rebooted timeline a bit better, especially as it's following on from the earlier points of that film and Apocalypse events and the First Class events. As it's following from those films' past events, it really should have synced up with its future events and then into Logan. But that's all changed again, and this time not for the better. So yeah, that was basically the point of that little ramble earlier. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and just to let you know, when I do the other X-Men reviews, when I do Days of Future Past, I'm going to do it on this main channel as opposed to the retro. Reason being is I'm now introducing a new rule. If I've seen a film at the cinema before 2015, that the review of that can also go on the main channel instead of the retro channel. So the thing, there's not many. It'd be Wallace and Gromit's The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, Over the Hedge, flushed away. Furry Vengeance. Does anybody remember that one? Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Parts 1 and 2. The Pirates and Adventurous Scientists. The Croods. Was there any in 2013? I did see it. Star Trek Into Darkness. The Croods. Frozen. And X-Men Days of Future Past. So those would all go onto the main channel, along with 2015 ones, of course, still got to be done. And yes, other ones, of course, would be on the Retro channel, of course. It's only cinema ones on here. So yeah, so I've introduced that rule for this. So yeah, Days of Future Past review would be on here, but the first 6 would be on the Retro channel. Anyway, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.
So, not Days of Future Past, too early. But because of that, it's looking like a good thing that this series is finished, and so the characters will be able to move on to because if this is the new timeline, let's hope the things turn out to be a little bit different next time round. Let's hope they can give us a decent, and it's all so on there in the
What can we do? Isn't there a way to control your new powers? Isn't there a way to control this? Isn't there a way to control this? Well, what? I seem to have these new powers that I don't seem to be able to... Hang on, I'm sorry. There is...
action. Now that's how it all should have been sorted.